Okay, so I'm gonna try to make this a little bit fun. This is an important one, and unlike typically where I just sort of steer into doing this with, kind of think about it a little bit and then log on. I actually sat down here and I pulled out the um, Alexander Lowen, oh, and Leslie Lowen, The Way to Vibrant Health, and also, so wait, I want to kind of like catch where this. Hmm. So crying, yeah, in the fourth hub. So right now we're in the techniques and exercises in the final. Oh my gosh, we're almost done. Only about 2-3 pages left. So crying as it relates to the fourth hub. I'll start there. Um, in the fourth hub, and especially as we start to really tune into the kind of like localization of like sensation as it relates to the exploration of each of these hubs. I think one of the things is like paying particular attention to where there's like sensation in the body, whether it's like heaviness in the legs and feet or like restlessness in the legs and feet, pain in the back, stomach, like that, we start to like actually be able to kind of use that as a kind of divining rod to tune in, to attend to ourselves, like to look at that as like this aspect of ourselves speaking to us, and that we're like our relationship with ourselves, like steering us back home to having this really like super like really like robust and responsive relationship with ourselves, where there isn't just this sense of like this mystery and even distrust in that mystery of like, oh my gosh, like, because I think, this is a little bit far afield, but I think there's kind of a tendency to feel like our bodies betray us by getting sick or whatever, by being like, people who, have like things about losing weight, where it's like, oh, my like there's this betrayal of, not being able to control eating and stuff like that. But yeah, so for fourth hub, part of like there's really like this all links together, that kind of sense of having had to hide parts of ourselves in order to belong, and the desire for connection, the desire for balancing, um and then one of the shadow aspects of this being grief. And so the grief that arises, I think there's things that we're socially sanctioned to believe are like grief worthy. Like it, and there's even some kind of almost like implied notion of like how much you're allowed to grieve for, like, there's probably some like actuarial table that's like, oh, a parent, direct relative, it's like, how well did you know that cousin, that kind of thing. It's so ridiculous. Where, you know, the thing about grief, and and this is just kind of one way to look at it, is that there are many things to grieve that we don't even necessarily know we should be sad about, which is parts of ourselves that are sad in not being able to be expressed. I mean, that may arise initially as some anger, as you explore the like repression of aspects of yourself to be socialized and accepted. But there's sadness, because there's at the heart, there's just this kind of like innocence. And so it's interesting when I was like prepping, when I was looking at this, prepping and kind of like thinking about this particular section, I remembered that how and I still do it, actually, I'm doing it now. When I was writing the book, I had a playlist where I actually developed playlists for every hub. And there was initially a Parinama playlist on Spotify that was before the actual structuring of the book existed, where I was kinda, like, pulling in sort of the notion of what this was that was trying to be sort of born, I guess, through me. And so those like, that was coming in, and it was really, like, it was just certain things were like zoom, 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 and it was like pulling in those feelings. I listened to a lot of music, um, and then while I was writing the book, there's hub playlists for the first. Now, actually, as I'm reprocessing this myself or going through my own process, I actually have another set of playlists that I'm doing for each of these hubs. But the song that came up spontaneously as I was considering this is the Katy B. She's Katyb, British artist, song from about 10 years ago. The song's called "Crying for No Reason." And then I listened to it again, and I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly it." Which is that there's kind of like a well of grief, and it's kind of like when we have an experience or, like, when we lose something that we understand to grieve, that gives us an outlet, so other things come up with it. And for anyone who's practiced, things like a somatic practice like yoga, it's very likely had surfacing of emotions pop up, I used to have this thing where I called it, like, clear crying, where I would be in the shower after a practice, and there'd just be sort of a, like, "Bloop," like, and it would be like, and it would just and there'd be no story with it. It would just be an arising of sadness that would just kind of, like, come out of me, and I know there's a lot of, like, a desire to attach a story with it because it feels like sort of, like, crazy, for for something to just sort of erupt for no reason, crying for no reason. Listen to the song. I'll attach if you want any of these playlists, just put it in the comment and I'll reply with the link. The songs that I mentioned, playlists, whatever. I'm happy to provide them if you'd like to look at them ever. But the thing is so and I guess this is probably why that song came up, which is "Crying for No Reason," is that it's like the notion of the song really, like, speaks to this, like, thing where, like, we're, like, kind of, like, so many things kinda get pushed out, and then you're just crying for no reason, and it's a beautiful song about that. And I also like that it doesn't really reconcile. I don't think it does, like, reconcile, like, be like, "Oh, it actually is because of this." It's like, just accepting that there is going to be sadness that is actually in like, so consider this is in your body right now, like, what we're talking about, and that interferes with, the stuckness of it interferes with sort of a naturally arising experience and phenomenon of living a life. And I'm not saying it's interfering. I'm very mindful of the terms I'm using here because interfering, implies that it's interfered with, that it's blocked, like I feel like it does, and, like, it's as an interference, I mean, it's a factor that is impacting the naturally it's not like the road isn't closed, it's limited access, and what we're doing is we're actually and this is the thing I wanna address, is that it seems really scary to let this stuff come up because when you, like, sort of open, there's kind of like a, "Whoa," like, there's a swell, and in that swell and this is, like, kinda why we kinda wanna climb the hubs to be able to establish some kind of notion of, like, physical security, a little bit with emotions, a little bit with being able to, kind of like inhabit ourselves from an interior, like the power that we house and trust in that. Not like not be looking for like ports in the storm. That these and this phenomenon can be happening in all like, from the ground up. This happens to people in the first hub. Um, Actually very common that happens in the first hub. Yeah. But we'll talk about it here very specifically because crying as it relates to the fourth hub is really important. And let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. Like I think that once the initial sort of bolus, like, and it can take a little while, and you can also realize that there's usually a stoppage. So if I'm going deeper into a process with a hub and it's starting to become relentless to me, starting to have that feeling of relentlessness, is I will just tell myself that's enough for right now. This is all I can do. Try that. Because I have a tendency to lean in really, like, kinda like, "Wow, oh, good, we kinda got a sort of vein here, let's, like," and then it'll be a lot, and then it's kind of like and then it's, like, revolting at times, where it's like, "Ooh," and so it's just kind of reattending to myself and saying, like, "That's enough for now," and that'll s like, that will stop it. Let's just say that's, like in a very patient way, in a way that's caring. It's like out of like love is to say like that's like this is what we can take. This is more, we've kind of exceeded or we're at where we what we can take for right now. So crying. Crying. I don't think I'm gonna be able to cry. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I will say that when I was writing the book and really working through these things, because a lot of what I was doing was experimenting on myself. And one of the things here, like, you've got in Ayurveda, there's definitely like quite a bit that is said about like not blocking feelings as they naturally arise. I mean, one of the things about Ayurveda though is like you don't have as much of like the cultural subtext of how much has already been suppressed before you're dealing with it. Because, I mean, because this is like it's kind of in the water, so to speak, that, holding things back isn't good for you. So you're not gonna have, I mean, you even see it. I mean, like you look at like think of like a Bollywood movie if if you've seen that kind of thing, where it's like there's still like really like pretty misogynistic gender roles. They're sweetly played out, but that the emotions aren't, like part of that isn't like the stoicism of the man, like that the man has his feelings. Um so one of the things, like, so as far as like looking to other cultures for this particular thing, I think it is something very that's important that we look to Western because of the fact that we're dealing with a backlog. And this is, European Western. I really, if you're in this like Parinamaverse, this book is it's really unsexy. I'm just gonna warn you. You wanna talk about something that isn't a consumer product. It is like it's like great. It's really great. I mean, like, one of, like, a central tenet he has is, like, that you stop holding your stomach in, like, that he's, like, that, like, this like, that you soften, and so, the taut abdomen, like, I mean, it's really it's funny in here, like, is it like, even just, like, the pictures and stuff, I mean, it's just like grandpa and grandma when you're, not visiting kind of vibes. But it's really beautiful. It's very succinct. Um, and it's like an extraordinary companion to this particular work. Um, Extraordinary. I, like, really absorbed like, I really spent a lot of time there was actually it's fu now that I'm remembering, there's a copy so I had the copy from the library. I borrowed hundreds of books from the library because I read so many and, didn't wanna own like, piles of books. And this book was actually, like, it was in this red because I think it's always been a soft cover. So for the library, they bound it, and it was this red book, and I had it. I just kept renewing it, like, indefinitely. I had it for so long, and I just kind of, like, loved it so much. I just would I carried it with me, and it was also, like, a really good size. It's actually about the size of this book here, the TPM, which is actually really great for writing on. So that's funny. Before, like, I don't think it just occurred to me that that was probably the only book that had the same dimensions in terms of like height and width as this book. But anyway, really recommend that. And also listen if you feel called, so called, listen to the Katy B KTYB song Crying for No Reason. Um What was I gonna say? It's interesting because this has been really evocative of, like, oddly enough, of the process of writing, Parinama and the process, like, like, the processing of the crying. Because, one more thing I'll mention before I start reading is that, there are a couple of things that relate to the my own 4th hub practice, and one of them was that I actually, if you I actually didn't believe that I felt loneliness. I remember just thinking, like, I don't relate to it as a feeling. Like, I was like, "I kinda like my own company, I don't feel lonely," and also I don't cry. It's like, I just don't cry, and I hadn't cried I mean, like, f in my 20s, I didn't cry, and then kinda when I opened that up, that began, but what so there's like, a significant period of sort of, like, survivalism where I was like, there's just no crying, but the thing is the crying so we talk about the evolutionary or the sort of evolution of a really good cry, which is, like, that it comes up as sort of like a whew, but what we're really trying to do is get like really like move the like recruit everything into it. And this is the thing where it's like, okay, like self-consciousness be damned. It's like if like do it by yourself, like do it in your bedroom. I like and I'd exaggerate it. Like I'd actually like what like once I was crying because I was like, I want, I was like, I'd like to process this, and also that like real like just kind of like so that's the cognitive thing, but there's also the thing of just like like it's just like this thing where it starts to feel like start to be able to connect that something's being released and let out. You can tell the difference when that's happening. Um, More on that later. But trusting into that, just I've asked people who've had, like talk to me about having big releases as far as like somatic releases with TPM. And the first question I always ask them is like, were you afraid? And I've yet to have anybody say that they were, but I'm sure that'll somebody, I mean, I haven't been afraid. I've been maybe overwhelmed. Maybe I'm just trying to think. Oh no, I've been afraid. I've been afraid. Yeah, just kidding. Um, I've been afraid, and I think one of the things with, like, the, being afraid was that I was being overtaken by these, like, really strong, intense, um, emotion, feeling, beliefs. Because it's like the thing is still tied to a belief, so it's like it's surging and it's still tied to a belief, so that, like, that can, like, actually, like, create this sort of kind of apocalyptic feeling of, like, everything's going dark kinda thing. Um, yeah. So in that case, I think it's particularly good to have someone that you can talk to, whether it's a, very like a personal relationship or a therapist. Yeah. But the thing is, like, back to that break of saying, like, "Okay, this is enough for now." Say, "This is enough for now." And whether it stops or recedes, but just that, yeah. Yeah. That's also an interesting experience to have. Alright, so I'm gonna read. It's not a long section. Talked a lot about it, but alright, so crying. So we are socialized very early to suppress the urge to cry. Tears are often stifled or hidden out of embarrassment, and sobbing and any associated noise are considered dramatic, childish, and only suitable for the absolute worst moments of life. Yeah. So interesting. You think about, like, when you see a child cry, that it's like they throw their whole body into it, and like, how much pressure is put on the parents to kind of, like, contain that, because it's like people don't like it. But let's take a moment with that, which is like, why don't we like that? Is there something inside of us that, like, wants to be crying too, and it's activating it? I mean, because the difficulty of, like, an unpleasant sound, so to speak, if, like, seen with empathy, it's like maybe it's a little annoying, right? But, like, the rage, some people get really angry that it's like, I mean, because I've had the thing, I don't know about you, I've had the thing where I see a child, like, having a meltdown, and, like, the first thought that comes to mind is, like, "Me too." I get it. Like, not my child, like, somebody in public where I'll be like, "Yeah, I hear it, I get that." Um, so suitable for the absolute worst moments of life. So, but even then, crying is mostly muffled sound and moisture coming out of our eyes with minimal movement. Like, there really is a thing where it's like the person who's, like, kinda stoic is like, "Wow, they're really strong." Strong. But it's like, it's so convenient because you wanna talk about, like, emotional capacity across the board where it's like, you look at other people that are, like, suppressing and repressing themselves now are, like, don't know how to handle and hold space for somebody else's grief, so it's kinda, like, really convenient for people to not express it because it takes people off the hook to kind of figure out how to deal with it. So, some people cry only when they see beautiful and poignant things, but not for grief or sadness. During one interview, a spouse told me that it concerned him that his wife quietly sobbed during sweet Pixar movies but appeared unmoved at the funeral of a beloved friend. The fact is, most of us have forgotten how to cry as a release and discharge of grief and sadness. As a result, we have the tightness of trapped grief in our chest and diaphragm. Some clients told me they didn't want to cry because they feared if they started, they would never stop. The first few cries can be significant, exhausting releases, but eventually things calm down, and a quick little sob keeps a sad moment from lingering. But it takes some practice. So, the three primary factors of crying are sound, movement, and of course, tears. So, when you feel the sting in your eyes, try to find a private place or a supportive person and allow the feelings to arise. To get things going, try to make sounds or repeat words like no, or I can't, or even this is too much, which can help with the release. Now bring movement into your chest. Perhaps adding a "ha" or "ah." "Ha," like, "This no, I can't, this is too much, ah." Like, you're, like instead of holding it back, it's like trying to open the aperture here. Um, if you have a soft surface like a bed or a couch, you can smack the palms of your hands on the surface for additional release. Like, when you feel the crying is past, as it always does, let yourself settle and relax before making any sudden moves. If it feels nice, splash some cool water on your face and take a few sips of water. You did a fantastic job. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because it's really like I can feel that right now, like, Yep. Using sound. Just thinking that because I can feel that, like, a little, ooh. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, like, just and the stuckness of sadness. And I think an important note on this is that it doesn't need if it feels outsized, if it feels like it's an oversized grief for the particular, like it's not following the actuarial model of like, this is only allowed this much sadness. If there's a lot more sadness, I mean, this can just be a backlog of other things that didn't have an outlet for expression. Even like on just ongoing sadnesses. And even it's kind of like, I think that's one of the things that like introduces shame into this, which is like, I shouldn't be that sad. Um, or just even this thing where it's like, wow, admiring the people that just have like the one tear going down their face as they kind of like stare off. Um, I mean, like, back to the Katy B song, "Crying for No Reason," it's like, it's stuff it's gonna come out. So, it's kinda like the way I look at it is it's gonna come out somewhere. So, if we have the opportunity to release some of it, all we're doing is, like, opening up more access to feeling more alive. And it opens up just kind of like the channel of joy because the diaphragm and the tightness in the chest, it's like there's a percolating joy of being alive. And one of the things that we're trying to connect to with this practice is this place that gives us energy and activation in this very particular way. And this is our divining rod of kind of following this particular thing we'll talk more about, but, like, there's tightness here, it's just harder to hear it, and there's a lot of, like, it's like, "I don't know what makes me happy," or whatever. It's like, even people that don't laugh a lot, or you have people like, "Ha, ha, 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 ha," and it versus, like, really laughing because it's like, "Woo!" Like, it's coming up, like, it's in you, like, the laughing is coming up, like, it's in you, like, you have that kind of child's laugh of, like, losing your mind and, oh, when you're a kid and you used to, like, laugh, like, wild with each other, it's like that's still in you. The idea that that's a behavior of childhood is incorrect. It's accessible in childhood because the adaptations have not formed around it to, like, calcify and sort of, interfere with the responsiveness of our organism. So it's like the crying, and I know it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, like, I get it, but the price is great for this, and also I'd be remiss if not to mention that, there is a social function to being able to hold something back, in real time. Yes, as adults, being able to, like, one of the things with the other side of this, and this is, also really worth mentioning, is that, um, there's places where we don't wanna cry. have to do with our boundary of our like being very like really vulnerable and releasing and showing parts of ourselves that are really inner circle aspects, because this is an intimate aspect of ourselves, like in like whether that's like probably a product of socialization, but like that, but yeah, I mean really, but that reality is that it is like, it's like if somebody hurts us and we kind of, in that moment sort of show up as, or even like a child, says something really, it reminds us of something or hurts us or makes us sad, or a child makes us angry because they're activating some of our bullshit. Um, there is something to be said for like, we're not trying to make this like dynamically responsive in a way that's like we have no control over it. It's just that there's awareness so that it's like we can compartmentalize it enough to like go find a place that's safe to express it. So that's also an important point here. Once again, it's very nuanced. This is nuance. This isn't just like, here's that one thing you do and everything gets better. It's like, this is like, it's a practice. It's ongoing. It's humaning. It's humaning. Rehumanizing. So, which is perfect because the next section is humanization. And the sections in this, the subsections in this rather, which is it's also funny to think about this because, as I'm thinking about like things about the production of this book, is that there's so much like it's kind of, you look at it now and it sort of like makes sense, but so much, it just was a lot to figure out how to handle sections, subsections, like the organization. I mean, because there's a lot of kind of, I don't know what to call it, moving parts, but there's like a lot of aspects of this, and the organization of it was like really a big lift of it. And it's funny to just see this and be like, that's a decision to make, which is like, it's a headline of humanization, and then there's the subsections, which are giving and altruism, activism, nature and forest bathing. Yeah. So we'll do those in the next reading. But yeah. Yeah. What an undertaking, huh? Tell you what. All right. So we made it. Here's to having a good cry. Listen to some good music. All right. I'll see you next time. I appreciate you so much. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. All right. Bye for now.